Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Familiar with the Matter. Today, we'll be talking about independent filmmaking with Sarah, the owner and executive producer at Rem Alternus Productions. Hello, Sarah.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. So everyone, per usual, if you have questions for Sarah over the course of the conversation, by all means, hold on to them until the QA time near the end of the show. This is set to go for about an hour, so around the 45-minute mark or thereabouts, we'll start taking questions. Of course, anybody who has a question that they are dying to have answered, and if you decide to super chat it, that'll, of course, get prominence in my mind. And I'm suddenly at a loss for words for the word I was looking for. But anyway, yay, live TV. So aside from that, by the way, there is a link to the Kickstarter that Sarah and her production company are currently undertaking for their project, Chicago Shadows, which we'll get more into shortly. And also Sarah's Twitter's in the description as well if you'd like to follow along with the progress of her and her project. So that being said, Sarah, what makes you familiar with the matter of independent filmmaking?
Well, it's actually fairly new for me. I have a degree in multimedia performance, so more the performance side of things in film, theater, and voice. And then, like most actors and performers, I ended up in retail for a while. So after that, I am a gamer, so I got to live all of these really great stories with friends and play role-playing games and sit around a table and tell interactive stories. And finally, I found one where I couldn't keep it in. I had to share it with everyone, and made some great connections at conventions and with other gamers, and found the people with the talent and skill that I lack. So I was able to use my retail management experience and pull them all together and create what we have going now. So most of it's luck and a lot of charisma rolls.
So what first got you interested in acting in the first place? Were you a big movie buff when you were younger?
I actually wasn't. I did Ren Fair, and I was in theater in high school. And when I think I was 16, and I was at a Ren Fair, and I played a fairy. And this little girl came up to me after the joust and was sobbing, and she came and hugged my legs. She saw me in a fight in the joust, and I got hurt. And she thought I was a real fairy. And I was like, oh, I want to do this. Yeah. So ever since then, it's been escapist life all the way. I love reading. I love TV and movies. I love gaming because you get to step out of your own problems and into someone else's, and it helps you kind of put your own in perspective. So I just fell in love with acting for that reason and being an escapist.
Yeah, I was part of a live action role play group for about 10 years, both as a player and as part of the staff in various times. And I always found the impromptu nature of making a character and sort of getting inside this other person's head that you made up in your own and sort of exploring that aspect of your personality in a safe sort of risk-free environment was always more interesting than actually living real life at times.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think there's a quote in Game of Thrones that I'm going to butcher, but it's, "A man lives only one life, a reader lives 1,000." And I love that thought.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
So what drew you to now? So the project you're working on right now, Chicago Shadows. Where did that idea come from, and how long have you been working on it?
So it's been about a 2-year process, and it came from one of our role-playing games. So I was lucky enough to play in a game of Shadowrun with one of the writers for the game itself. And Shadowrun's been around for about 30 years, so for exactly 30 years this year. And so he was such a great storyteller, and the first game master I had that was an actual writer, that I just fell in love with his world that he created for us. And from there, I actually had a dream before a convention, a gaming convention, that we made it into a series. And I laughed when I woke up, and then all of a sudden it wasn't so funny. And I really wanted to do it. So I wrote a really bad pilot episode for a script and pitched it to the line developer for Shadowrun, and he thought it was kind of cool. So he helped with consulting for edits. And a year later, we had a really good script, and we brought Rem Alternis into existence. So that's been, we've been incorporated since September of 2018. And this whole year has been about this moment and prepping for this Kickstarter and sharing our love of cyberpunk fantasy storytelling to the world. So it's been great.
Had you ever? So as viewers will know, I'm something of a writer myself. At least I have an English degree, so I can fake it. Had you ever written a script for anything prior to this?
No, I am not a writer. It's funny. These are some of the people that I've now got around me that have the skills and talents that I don't have. I'm great. If you get me in front of people, I can talk. But when I sit down and try to write persuasively or anything like that, I don't have that skill. But luckily, there are a lot of talented people that want to see the series come to life, and so they've volunteered to help me. I actually write blog posts that are on our website, and every single one of them has been vetted by my content writer, because he's like, all right, you word vomit and I'll fix it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you use any software to write your script, or was it just sort of like freehand?
I started with, I think it's Celtex or Keltex, or I'm probably butchering that, but I did it on my phone. I was actually in a play, and I would, during the scenes that I wasn't on stage, I would sit in the dressing room and just write. And then it was a lot of sending those edits to other people, and eventually we transferred it to Google Docs, just because it was, there were so many hands on it that it was easier to maintain. But yeah, so that's really our script writing software experience so far.
And are there any particular genre? I mean, obviously there's genres involved in the world itself, but were there any sort of like stories or movies or anything that you drew inspiration from in crafting the tale for this?
Well, with cyberpunk and fantasy, there's always that mixture of what I like to think of as Blade Runner meets Matrix meets Lord of the Rings. So you've got the fantasy element, you've got magic, you've got elves and orcs and dwarves. And then you've also got the futuristic AR technology that you see a lot in the Matrix. You've got that cyberpunk feel of Blade Runner. So putting all of that together and being true to that genre is really rewarding and really free, because you get to write your own future. So you can make it whatever you want it to be.
But I have to imagine that also adds layer upon layer of complication in a production, because you've got special effects and makeup effects and all kinds of things like that to fulfill those aspects of the genre. So you're the idea smith. You're not the wordsmith. You find yourself some wordsmiths. How do you go from, okay, now I've got a script, I've got an idea, but now I want to actually start a production? What's the next step after that?
Sure. So we knew that we wanted to incorporate our own production company, and that we'd bring on or subcontract the talent that could get a lot of it done. Luckily, like I kind of see myself as the fixer, so putting all the right people together to make it happen, which is pretty much what producing is. So I actually, through a mutual connection, found a production company here in Chicago that has done some films. The directors won a couple of local awards, and they actually were, when I reached out to them, they showed me one of their videos that was a very dark world and high intensity, and very similar to what we want to portray. So and they were fans of the genre themselves. So we wanted to partner there. They've been great. This is Red Leg Productions, if you want to look them up. But they've been great since they're fans of the genre as well. Everyone is doing the trailer for as cheap, if not free, as possible, so that we can show what our quality is and our proof of concept, and then really make this into a powerful series down the line.
And how do you, I mean, never having done a production like this before, how do you vet the people you bring on that you're maybe only familiar with tangentially, and sort of trust them with that, responsibility of being part of this process?
Yeah, so what's great is that I've actually, since we've started to gain a little bit of a following, I've had other people reach out to me that want to help. There was a producer in Atlanta that reached out to me earlier this week, and I by no means know the best way to do any of this right now. So even as consulting and advice and stuff like that, like I encourage people to reach out, and we want to be engaged with our fan base and our community and take feedback seriously and stuff like that. But I think for the most part, when a recommendation has come my way, it starts with a meeting, and I do my pitch. And if it's something they're interested in, then they kind of have that opportunity to pitch themselves and show me what they do. And if it's something that mutually fits, then we start to talk about moving forward. So it's, just being very honest and direct with feedback and saying, this is what we're looking for, this isn't what we're looking for, and seeing how it all comes together.
So with all the with your core group and your subcontractors, how many people, if you know exactly or round figure, are currently working on this project?
My core group is 5 people. So we've had production calls every single week for a year now. And I have a web developer. So every week it's, okay, how was your project from last week? What are we moving forward with this week? So everyone gets assignments, and I'm kind of that main delegator. We use Trello to organize kind of like our project management tool there. But that's my core team. I'd say that's on the production side of things. And then on the creative side, it's pretty large. Between the writers that I have, the editors that I have, there's more editors than there have been writers, because we want to make a good script. And then our production company that we're working with is a core of 2 people. And then they've got special effects people that they'll go through and get us whatever other tools we need. And then we have a prosthetics and makeup team of 2 that have done a lot of horror films and stuff like that before and are really gaining traction. And there's actually a picture on our Kickstarter page of some of the quality of what our prosthetics guy can do. He did an orc prosthetic mask about 5 years ago. So he's only gotten better since then, but it's pretty cool. And then I've got a costumer and a cosplay designer, and they actually helped me build the lab coat for our main character, Curie, and cyberpunk it up. We brought in a software developer and an electrical engineer to really make it light up and remote controlled and make it do some really cool things. So I think that's most of my creative team at this point. If we get funded, then we'll be in pre-production and we'll really start pulling a team together and start casting and get all that started.
So you've been working on this for about 2 years. If you could go back in time and give yourself some advice based on what you know now versus what you knew then, what would you tell yourself to save yourself either frustration or headaches or anything else that you've learned along the way?
I think in a lot of ways, I'm really glad that we gave ourselves that 2 years, because it was the perfect amount of time. You could always use more time before starting a Kickstarter, but it was about a week before launch that the to-do list kind of disappeared, and we were like, oh my, what do we do now? It's been 2 years since we've not had something to do. So but now that it's launched, there were things that I put off until launch. Like I didn't want to reach out to some of our contacts until we had the live page for them to see and reference and tweet and everything like that. So our intentions were good there. But I think giving them a warning, not for their sake, but for ours, it's been very stressful, because like now it's all just marketing, and clicking refresh on that Kickstarter page and waiting for that number to go up. So I think I would have given myself more time for that, and really thinking about, all right, on this day, I'll reach out to these 3 people, and on this day, and really like planning that out. Cause now it's just like, oh gosh, where do I start? Who do I reach out to first? And in what order, and what am I doing? So everything I think we were like July 12th, July 12th, July 12th. And now that we're past July 12th, it's like, we should have thought this far ahead.
Right.
So, but luckily I do have a lot of marketing avenues, and it is, it's been a really positive experience. It's mostly the stress that I'm just putting on myself more than anything else.
Yeah, and at least as of this broadcast, you're about halfway to your initial goal. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, just over a week, and we're at 46%.
Now, this is a funder for just the trailer. You're just making sort of a professional trailer for what you want to do going forward as a series. Is that correct?
Yes.
So so fingers crossed, your trailer gets fully funded. You make the trailer. Then what's the next step? Like how many episodes do you want to do for a first season, and how much conceivably would each of these episodes cost, etc.?
So yeah, filmmaking is very expensive. So it's for just our trailer, and like I said, everyone helping for as cheap, if not free, as possible. Our goal is $15,000 for a 5-minute trailer. So we already have written 4 out of our 6 episodes for season 1. And those are going through the editing process now. The pilot is totally ready. But when we're ready to move forward, it's going to be roughly $150,000 per episode. So part of why we wanted to do the trailer was really get that buy-in now and build our audience and like show what we can do now. So we have something to show, because right now when we say we're producing a live action cyberpunk fantasy series, people kind of look at me and they're like, you can tell that there's questions going on in their brains that they don't quite know what they are. So I want to be able to have that 5-minute video that's like, this is exactly what we want to do, but we want to build on it, and we want a good story, and this is the quality of what we can produce.
See, I forget who it was. I was watching, I think it was an interview with, I think it was Bruce Campbell or something, and they brought up the point that today, the tools at the hands of your Joe average person, between digital cameras and editing software and everything else, are just, light years beyond anything anybody could have hoped for 20, 30 years ago in independent filmmaking. And yet the costs still seem to be, at least from my perspective, just be exorbitantly large. What would you say is the biggest expense that the money is having to go towards in this endeavor?
From my perspective, it's toward the film production, because there's so much that goes into it. Not only do you need the pre-production planning, location scouting, licensing, casting, and the amount to pay the cast and the crew. Then in post-production, you have editing. And with cyberpunk fantasy, you're going to need a lot of special effects, the prosthetics team, and everything that they can do in building custom fitted prosthetics that are reusable so that we can use them for more than one episode. So that's like, for an orc with tusks, they're going to need their own teeth designed that they can do. So especially with this genre, it's got a price tag because there's just so much. And I actually, as being fairly new to getting into this, I was looking for a motion graphics editor. And what they told me is that it's about for 1 to 2 seconds of animation in a commercial that you see, or marketing, or even in a series or something like that. That could be about 1 to 2 hours of work for a second. So when you start thinking like, all right, well, we're going to need a lot of CG. We're going to need a lot of those post-production effects. We're going to need a lot of props and costumes and all that stuff that goes into it to even allow the graphics animation to look good. You're looking at a lot of time and money there.
And I sort of reminded me, there was a little video that came out not too long ago about the guy who directed Shazam, and how like on the set things would go wrong or plans would go awry, and they just have to work around them in order to get the thing done, or to find a way to do it cheaper than had been planned. Has there been any moment thus far in the process where you found a way to solve a problem that was, maybe in an unconventional way, but it saved money or saved time?
Not being in production yet, in pre or post production. The only thing we've done for content so far really is the photo shoot that we had. So I think that in that case, there's always something that can go wrong. Even with the lab coat that we did for Curie, there's it's got wires and soldering and stuff like that, so that a wire comes loose and all of a sudden you can't use it. So that's going to be post-production now. So it's honestly, I think that most of it is being adaptable for for whatever could come up. So our trailer is actually supposed to take place in winter, but that can actually cause a lot of complications, because what if there's a snowstorm? What if people can't get through? What if, the weather just doesn't abide? What if we don't have what we need to do? So it's constantly like, well, how crucial to the story is this? What can we change? How do we adapt? So it's constantly like, no problem, shut something down. It's just got to be like, all right, what's the next best answer? So I think even in terms of our photo shoot and stuff, we showed up that day and we had an actor coming to play our cybernetically enhanced fighter. And we didn't have a costume for him that day. So we brought in a bunch of things. My costumer brought in a coat from our costume shop at the theater we volunteer for. And we just had a bunch of odds and ends. And our makeup artist actually brought in a little bit of LED wire and a bald cap. So she ended up putting the wire under the bald cap and painting it on him and then turning the lights on. So it looked like it was glowing under his skin. So it's just constantly coming up with ideas as a team, and like everyone's input is necessary in order to get through stuff like that.
Now, okay, so when it's trailer's fully funded, how long between, as far as you can tell right now at least, because obviously things can change, between we're fully funded and everything's complete and it's out for the world to see? How long do you think that's going to be?
I'm thinking, so if we get fully funded, we are officially in pre-production. So I think what we're going to do is shoot for filming late fall. And then we would be, and it's only going to take 2 to 3 days for filming. So from there, we would be in post-production. And my hope is by spring, because that's gaming convention season, that I could take this with me to the conventions and stuff like that. And they have indie film panels and all kinds of festivals and stuff like that. So the goal would be early spring to have the trailer complete and start gearing up for the pilot.
Okay. Let's see. What was I going to ask? My brain suddenly went kablooey. Oh, well, all right. So all that is preamble. Tell us a little bit, if you can, about the setting, because I'm kind of a story guy. I'm really big on sort of the broad scope of the tale and the world building and things like that. So where, when, and what, under what circumstances does Chicago Shadows begin?
Sure. So Chicago Shadows takes place in 2077 for the start of it. So 60-ish years in the future. Chicago had a post-apocalyptic event that actually wiped out most of the city, and they started to rebuild about a few miles south. So in our main art that you can see on the top of the Kickstarter in the intro video, you'll see a lot of darkness in the foreground. That's where Chicago used to be. And then you see the bright skyline ahead, and that's where Chicago is now. So with that, we've got the world is run by corporations pretty much. So it's still a political game. There's still a government and stuff like that, but really the ones with the power are the corporations. And you can have their workers pretty much live within those corporations and have everything provided for and stuff like that. So there aren't always those that have the benefit of living within, or benefit, I guess, depending on your perspective, of living within these corporate metroplexes. So the ones on the outside that are basically outlaws, they'll get by in any way they need to in order to survive. So they'll take jobs for theft or extraction or planting evidence against another corp, or whoever hires them and is willing to pay, they're willing to work. So our story falls around a small group of these outlaws, and them just trying to make their place in the world and do what they feel could maybe even make the world a better place. And so it really draws that line. There's the darkness of that criminal underworld, but there's also that hope of building a better and freer life of tomorrow. So it's so there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of social commentary, that can be taken into effect today. Warnings for the future, for 60 years in the future, as a lot of cyberpunk has. But yeah, that's the premise of our story.
And now when I first saw this, being a gamer myself, my first thought was, oh, is this a Shadowrun production of some kind? But this is its own thing, correct?
Yeah. So while we have a lot of the writers and our consultant is even the line developer. He's our story consultant, the line developer for Shadowrun. We wanted this setting to be able to stand on its own. So we, in a genre as narrow as cyberpunk fantasy, there's bound to be a lot of similarities there. It's a post-apocalyptic world that's got futuristic technology, and what does that mean? And now we're also crossing over with fantasy and all these different races now and stuff like that. So I think it's I think there's a lot of room for separate storytelling and stuff like that, but the setting and genre is just going to have a lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm. And to what would be the sort of the one element aside from the different races, the magic and stuff? What's the one element that you would say sets you apart from Shadowrun as its own thing?
That's a good question. I think really what it is the storytelling itself. Because we aren't bound by, again, Shadowrun's been around for 30 years. So they've got, a lot of setting events that have happened, and we don't have to stick to that. We don't have to abide by 30 years of lore. We can make up our own lore. Right. So I think that between the stories that these characters are going through, and then also the world around them and how that world has been impacted by the awakening of magic and these different races, I think that that's what's going to make us different.
All right. And now it's one of those moments, as my viewers will know, where my brain's hit kind of a wall. Is there anything I haven't asked yet, or anything that you wanted to talk about or mention that hasn't already come up?
That's a good question. I was on autopilot for so long now.
Yeah.
I think, just taking a look at the Kickstarter page and seeing, if it's a story in a genre that excites you. We have more content coming. We have more rewards and great stretch goals coming. So if it's something that you are interested in and want to be part of from the ground up, something that's important to us is, like I said before, including our community. We want to take this journey with our backers and with our supporters and with our fans. So you can be as involved as you want to be. That's really up to you. But we really appreciate any support and feedback that we get.
And pie in the sky dreams. If the trailer gets funded and the series, let's say the pilot episodes gets funded, where would you like to see the series end up?
Right now we're planning for a web platform, so it would be available online as a web series. Kind of thinking like the Guild started. So we have our own website, so we would start from there, and then we'd of course distribute via DVDs with special features and things like that. And we really want to make it an interactive world. So while the trailer focuses on one of the characters that is in the series itself, we have different rewards and stretch goals that actually allow for more story. So I believe it's the 250 level and higher. Your name will be included in a short piece of fiction that comes out as a prequel to the series itself. So you'll get to know some of these characters. We're going to do a short story for each of the characters, depending on funding. And your name will be, a contact or a street name or whatever else, but you'll get entered as canon in our story. And we'll get to keep growing the world like that. So.
And the question I always ask, if someone listening was interested in not doing their own or starting the process of doing their own film production of one sort or another, being that you're effectively a novice at this yourself, what advice would you give somebody who is interested in starting that process?
Really, don't be afraid to delegate. Don't be afraid to network and talk to people. The one of the things that the line developer for Shadowrun actually told me is I've gotten as far as I have based on sheer enthusiasm. So when you're excited about something, and especially in the gaming community, because everyone's excitable about everything in the gaming community. Mm-hmm. So like if you can sell it, then there's someone that's going to want to help you. I've had people pull me aside and say, like, how do I get involved? How do I help? How do I support? And that's how I ended up with my team, my core team that I have now. People just want to help see you succeed and help start something like this. Mm-hmm. And then in the future as well, I've thought about what does Realm Alternities become? Let's say that the series happens and it all goes great. What next? And I'd really like to be a fixer for a lot of those startup artists and creators that maybe don't have the network that I've been lucky enough to stumble into. So I want to get them connected. I want to link them to local artists or editors or publishers or audiobook narrators or whatever they're looking for. I want to help them get started as well.
Yeah, I've had the fortune of being surrounded in my life by many creative people, many who are far more industrious in expressing their creativity than I end up being. One of my co-hosts she's already got like 3 or 4 books either published or on the way to being published in a fantasy series.
Wow.
Yeah, just all over the place, and I'm always jealous / proud of / why can't I do that kind of thing? Because it just. That's my biggest problem. Is like I'm full of ideas. It's the getting it down on the page that's the hardest part. And I think I kind of share your enthusiasm. I just gotta dig my teeth into actually doing something about it.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think I know for some of the ideas that I've had, if I talk it, I'm much better. Yes. At getting my ideas across. And then I know that a friend of mine has ghost written for someone with that same kind of problem. So finding a ghostwriter too could assist with that.
Yeah, I always work best if somebody, like, my brain's just waiting for somebody to give me the seeds of, like, I used to do this thing on the show, the show I do every night, where I'd say, hey, you want me to make you a custom advertisement for something? And somebody would say, ooh, write me a movie trailer about a magic sword that lives on the moon. And that's all they'd say. And then I just, all of a sudden my brain would go, oh, okay. And then I, churn out something that almost sounded like plausible for a movie pilot in, 20 minutes or something. It's just like the way my mind works, unless somebody like really gives me an oomph, doesn't quite go anywhere. And so it's always the hardest part is the self-initiation and the self sort of like, okay, because it feels like a chore. I've already got it all written out in my head. I got to write it down too.
I'll be honest. I would not have made it this far without my core team and my web developer, especially for the past year. I think at least 3 nights a week, we would get on Discord and just chat while we both worked on stuff for REM. And I think honestly, like having someone meeting me there held me accountable to actually get into my office and do the work. Yeah. And kept me focused because I had someone to chat with or someone just to meet that was counting on me to be somewhere. And because I agree. Sometimes it's like, oh, well, nobody's meeting me. Maybe I'll just take a nap instead.
Yeah. Until somebody actually gives you the assignment and expects you to turn it in on time. Not a whole lot of incentive there to actually do it, it seems like.
Right.
All right. Well, again, anything didn't mention or wanted to talk about real quick before we move on to see if we have questions from anybody?
I'm feeling pretty good.
All right. Well, people listening, if you happen to have any questions you'd like to ask Sarah about the Chicago Shadows project or filmmaking in general, put them in the chat. We'll give it a couple minutes for lag to catch up. It's always possible, given that it is a lazy Sunday, we might not get much or any questions, so that's always a risk. But hey, sure. Live TV. Yeah. So let's see. Just as a check-in. So right now you are at a $15,000 goal. You're at $6,853. So just a little bit of near to halfway done, and you got 20 days to go. And I'm sure you're counting down every minute to see how things progress.
Definitely.
Let's see here. So tell us a little bit about while we're waiting. about the main character for this trailer.
So the main character for the trailer is Curie. She has gained or found her magical powers. So she actually has a focus on ice. So she has ice magic, and she is actually from England, just newly arrived to Chicago. And she's one of these outlaws. So she's trying to, make her way in this underworld to find her place, to find safety. And she's actually very much kind of like a Jessica Jones type character. She's come from a hard past, and she's just trying to find her place and build trust with a team of people that have her back as much as she can have theirs. So,
and who plays Curie? Is that you?
Yeah, I'll be playing Curie. So I finally get to bring the performance side of it back after all the production. But she was my character in the role-playing game that inspired all this. And so it's going to be fun to play her. She's in the trailer itself. It's going to be just set to music, and it's going to be her and her team of the day trying to pull off a mission that they were hired for. But of course, no mission is ever 100% easy. So she has a run-in with another group that's trying to go for the same target she is, and wackiness ensues. There's a big fight scene, and you get to see a little bit of what Curie can do and what some of the others can do as well.
Yep. Quote from a movie I like: "A plan is just a list of things that don't happen."
Yep. That's exactly it.
Let's see. Necrosol says, what has been the number one problem you have come across so far?
I'd say the biggest problem for me has been the two pieces that I couldn't connect to someone that I knew. So I was lucky enough to have an accountant friend that lives out in Seattle from a past life in my retail jobs, who now has his own tax accounting company. And so he's been helping us with our accounting side of things, which is amazing. But I also have a lawyer friend, but he doesn't cater to arts. So that's been the one thing where it's like, oh man, lawyers are expensive, and
yeah,
and we need one. So finding someone and tapping that list of resources has been probably one of the bigger challenges for us. Other than that, we've been lucky that if we don't have the answers, someone we know does. I can't tell you how many times I've gone on Facebook and just said, do I know anyone that does film editing? Do I know anyone that does this? And people speak up and are happy to help. So I think finding the lawyer and then marketing has been the biggest challenge. I had to learn marketing myself for social media. I did not speak Twitter at all about 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, I took a class on Udemy, and now I very much see its value, and it's actually kind of fun to maintain. So I've kind of learned how to do that one myself, which at times, like, I've had to put that down in the past couple of weeks. We've got Hootsuite and everything, but in terms of my learning, we've got to focus on the Kickstarter. So I had to drop that. But I'd say those two things were my biggest challenges personally, but someone else might not have that experience if they know the right people.
Let's see. Stoned Doge, I think, says, other than Shadowrun, which was already mentioned, what are other sources of inspiration for your world and characters?
Gibson, definitely. And his books for cyberpunk. It's funny for me, like, I'm more my inspiration when I collaborate with my writer. He's got the cyberpunk experience. I love fantasy. Like, I actually, when we were sitting down to play Shadowrun with our D&D group, I complained I didn't want to play Shadowrun. I was like, that sounds stupid. And I'm obsessed with it. So my side is more the fantasy aspect. So I definitely, every time I rewatch Lord of the Rings at least once a year, that's a huge thing for me, where I get fresh ideas, or like, oh man, they should have a conversation like that. Or, oh, I didn't think about approaching it from this side. And what are they doing? Have we talked about their downtime and what they do in their downtime, and all that kind of stuff. But I'd say for the cyberpunk side of it, Gibson definitely, Blade Runner definitely, Matrix definitely. So I think those are the biggest bits of inspiration that we've taken from.
What did you think of the latest Blade Runner movie?
I'm in. I had fun with it. I definitely am one for the original.
Yeah.
But like, luckily I'm able, with the escapism side of things, I'm able to kind of set things aside and like just zone in and have a good ride, even if it's not the original.
I'm a movie freakazoid, and so when I just recently saw the sequel, and I was kind of like, it's pretty.
Yeah,
that was kind of my reaction. I was like, I mean, it's very interesting to look at.
yeah,
I don't know if it quite caught the and of course the logic of the like my brain just starts. I can't help but start nitpicking like in the moment of watching the thing, even though I'm supposed to be escapism. Some movies can just let me do that, and I don't have to think about it too hard. But when you're getting down to something as sort of, especially something that has to live up to a previous iteration of something, I always end up going, how does this mesh with the previously established storyline?
right.
I can't help but do that and see how well it fits in, because I'm such a story, like when I'm playing a role-playing game, when I play D&D with some guys, and I don't play D&D that often, I always rely on somebody else at the table to be the rules lawyer, because I'm awful at the mechanics. I'm all about story, awful at the mechanics. And so
Shadowrun is known for its crunch, and I was lucky enough too that I was invited to be part of the first actual play podcast for Shadowrun 6th edition, which was announced in May. So we've got one more episode of that coming up next week. But it's all 6th edition is a lot less crunch, but I'm the same way. Like, for me, it's all story. I don't care about the rules if it makes something cool happen or whatever. So I definitely get overwhelmed by by the rules.
Let's see, Necrosol asks, do you seek out the, quote, possible real technology, unquote, to try incorporating in, or have y'all made it all from scratch? I guess, are you taking any inspiration from current technological developments and sort of advancing them to your world, or are you just sort of making it up out of whole cloth?
We definitely want to. There's ideas that we have already in place for the trailer, but when it comes time for the pilot, and even when we were designing Curie's lab coat, my costumer, she's all about visualization. So she's like, "Ooh, we could add a cord here that looks cool because it goes here." And I'm like, "Yes, but what's the purpose? If it doesn't have a purpose, we're not adding it to the coat. It's got to do something. Why would she have had that installed in her coat?" So like, it's important to us that everything makes sense. Even the back of her lab coat has this gold ribbing on it that is actually, I'm going to try to say this on the air. It's going to be embarrassing, but I might do it. Polybenzimidazole. Yeah. So that's, it's something that's about as tough as Kevlar, but I think they've used it like for NASA and stuff like that, because she used to work for NASA. But since it's as tough as Kevlar, but it's gold in color, we designed the lab coat in that color, the back panel of that. So like, if she gets shot in the back, she's got that guard, but it's also netted, so it looks more futuristic than just having a big gold block on her. But yeah, so we want it, and actually on her back as well, the back panel that lights up, there's a carving of a chemical formula, and it's the chemical formula for polybenzimidazole. So we have a lot of little Easter eggs like that too, but we really want to make sure that we're doing the world justice and doing it right every step that we can. So I'm on a lot of cyberpunk Facebook groups and stuff. So anytime people post stuff that is like a cool looking weapon of the future or whatever like that, I'm like, ooh, let's look this up. Is this doable? So yeah, we're looking for a lot of those options. Altered Carbon also, I just recently watched, and that's got some great cyberpunk stuff in it. So yeah, that's inspiring.
I had a similar situation when I was helping to run this large LARP with a staff of people and things, and I was kind of one of the people in charge, at least maybe second in command, and some of the other administrators would say, ooh, I want to bring in this character to do this thing, this NPC, da-da-da. And my first question was always, how is your character's arrival a direct result of the actions of the players? Because one of the things you always have to watch other people's egos. Like, you're not just doing this to satisfy your own bubble. It has to make sense to the story. It has to be an outgrowth of what's actually taking place over what you're sort of, curating as a manager, so to speak. So I'm always real, sticky on that stuff. It's like, okay, looking cool and making sense. There's got to be a balance there.
Yeah.
And
Well,
the making sense should take precedence in my mind over looking cool.
definitely. And that's why I'm so excited by my lead writer, Scott Schlatz. He's the one that ran the story for me in the first place, for me and my group. So there were things that would happen where you'd make a bad roll, or you'd say something to an NPC or something like that, and 9 months later it would come back to haunt you.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
But that's the stuff where like I loved that that feeling of, you're playing your game and something happens and you connect the dots in your brain that he has laid out so precisely of why it makes sense and everything, and as soon as it connects, you're like, oh, you son of a.
Yeah, no, that's one of the aspects of my favorite television show of all time, The Shield. Events that take place, little throwaway lines in like the first 2 episodes, pay off 3 seasons down the line. It's just like, oh my God! So it makes not only the world more cohesive, it also means that everything you see potentially has consequence, and that's all. And if you just have stuff that happens and you never get it's a loose end that never ties up or it never means anything, that's always far less exciting than if you can watch something and really pay attention and know that there's always the potential that you, the viewer, could make a connection before the story does. If you know that the story and the people making it are taking it seriously enough to think at least that far ahead, or at least leave themselves an open hook for that to mean something down the line.
Yeah, definitely. And there's always consequences. Whatever choices a character makes, whether good consequences or bad, they're there. And that's going to open certain doors and close others. And paying attention to that is really important and fun. I'm with you. I'm 100% story. If it's not a good story, you don't have me. So
yeah, if I'm playing a game and I don't feel like as a player / character what I'm doing matters, I'm not nearly as invested and don't care nearly as much. So if the GM or whoever's writing it takes that into account, really makes that matter, then I feel like I'm part of the story and not just going along with the GM's version of events. That's always one of the tough things, is finding and not only just in playing a role-playing game, but somebody who's writing something. It's like, are they simply leading the audience along by the nose and these things happen just because they have to happen for the story to proceed? Or does it feel organic? Does it feel like something where you can get drawn in?
Right.
Yeah.
That the choices are really up to you. It's not, you're not being railroaded.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in. So I guess we can, as live TV goes, we'll start wrapping this up. So everyone listening now and in the future, link to the Kickstarter for Chicago Shadows is in the description. All the Necrosol, you break up my mojo. All right, is there anything we, the audience, can do to help you and your team other than money?
Social media is big. Thank you for asking, by the way. Social media is huge. Our reach is only as far as our reach. So really getting, we have some really great photos on our Facebook page, which is Rem Alternatives Productions, our Twitter, which is at Rem Alternatives. Yeah, any social media pushing, retweeting, sharing is a huge help. Also, if there's anything that that you can do, if you have a skill that relates to what we're doing or just the interest, I do have a private email listserv of people that have been like, I want to help, I just don't know how. And periodically I'll send an email out and be like, hey, I'm going to need neon lighting for a photo shoot or whatever. And just random stuff comes up, and we ask for advice and help from that group. So, and my email is producer@remalternatives.com. So you can always reach out there too.
Yeah, guys, just like we talk about on the Lords of the Night, that's our nightly show that we do the talk show on. YouTube and the larger platforms, they do very little to help promote smaller content creators out there. And similarly with independent filmmakers, as much passion and talent as goes into that, they're only known as much as people give the effort to spread the word. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, if you want to support independent creators, a simple retweet can change somebody's world depending on who sees it next. So a retweet, share, tell somebody about it. Word of mouth will always be far greater in the long run than a 30-second ad. well, like I say, with that, link to the Kickstarters in the description. Sarah's Twitter address also is in the description there. The project's currently at halfway funded. So what I'm looking forward to is, fingers crossed, break a leg, all that good stuff. The trailer gets fully funded and gets produced and all that wonderful stuff. And then hopefully after that's out, I can have you on again and we can talk about the production process and the aftermath and where things are headed after that.
That'd be great. I'm sure I'll have all new kinds of anxiety to talk about at that point.
Yay! Anxiety makes life interesting. So yeah, guys, take a look at the Kickstarter if you get a chance, and if you are so inclined, by all means, fund it as you can, and hopefully track and see its progress to its completion. But with that, hey Sarah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you. This was fun.
And guys, if you happen to have a particular area of the world that you are at least a middling expert in or a beginner at, and you're interested in talking about it on the show, as you see from previous episodes, I'll take on just about anything that I find interesting or might be interesting. So email if you want to send me your pitch is a scribelight3, all one word, and the number, not the word for the number, at gmail.com. Or, tweet me a pitch on Twitter. And yeah. Well, with that, guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you on Lords of the Night tomorrow night on Satsu's channel. And again, Sarah, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, have a good rest of your Sunday, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.